Thank you very much, Jill, and best wishes from all of us in your new role. And this is a good chance, considering that you're in the familiarisation process, to actually hear from some of our principals. So we've got 3 current principals and, of course, Judith on our panel, and I'd like to introduce you to them. What they're going to do is each one will just speak briefly about the context in which they find themselves and maybe talk about their vision for what education could be in an ideal world in Victoria, and then we'll have a chance for a bit of interaction with you. So firstly we have Susan Ogden from Dandenong High School, the principal, and Susan has been a long-standing member of staff at Dandenong, so she has only been the principal there for 3 years, but actually has been there for many more, so you'll be interested to hear her story. Then we have Rick Gervasoni, who's the new principal at Ballarat Secondary College, and when I saw Rick last year, he just found out that he'd been appointed to that position, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was in that kind of ambivalent space. I've got a new chance, what will it mean? Deb Harmon, of course, from Balwyn High School, and Deb has been there for 6 years as principal, and before that as AP. And then, of course, we'll hear from Judy as well in her new role as the president of FAST. So could you please welcome them? And we'll hear from you first, Susan. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure, honour and slightly nerve-wracking to be here and talk to you this morning. So, as was introduced, I'm the principal of Dandenong High School. I've been the principal for 3 years, but yes, I have been at the school for a long time. I've been a staff member there for 26 years, and I started as a graduate teacher. And when I say that, people are often surprised, and so am I, because it doesn't feel that long. And one of the reasons it doesn't feel that long, or there are several, is that I've had many different roles within the school, and I've constantly reinvented myself and my focus, the focus for my work. The other is I had a large period of family leave in the middle. And the other is that, as many of you may know, Dandenong High School is a very different school. So from 2005 onwards, it has, just like me, reinvented itself and is very different now than what it was. And I've been asked to share 3 things with you. I'm going to very briefly take one essence of my story. And I just wanted to share with you that I didn't begin my leadership journey. I began it late, and I didn't begin it ever intending to be a principal. In fact, quite the opposite. I went into education because I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to make a difference. And I believed when I started at Dandenong that I could do that in the classroom, because that was where the important work happened. So when I got the tap on the shoulder, which I did about 10 years into my role, into my job, I ignored that and said, no, I want to stay in the classroom, that's where my focus is. And then I became a year level coordinator. And I realised as a year level coordinator that my influence extended beyond the 25 students I had in the classroom. I then had the influence because I could develop programs for a range of students to influence and support the learning of 200 students across the school. And then I became the leader of curriculum, so a leading teacher for curriculum, and I was working with teachers in challenging teacher practice and developing learning programs. And I realised how I had the influence to make a difference in learning for a larger number of students, in fact the students across the school. And then I became an assistant principal, and even then I thought that the principalship wasn't for me. And it wasn't until 6 weeks into acting in the role, and I didn't have to travel as far as many people here to become a principal. I had to travel 10 paces from one office to the other. So even though it was small geography, it was a huge change though into the big chair. It wasn't until 6 weeks in that I realised that that was what I wanted to do. And it's because I think that I understood for the first time what the role of principal was, and that I had incredible influence then to shape a community. And in the 3 years I've been principal, I see that my influence and my ability to make a difference moves beyond the school into system-wide leadership. And it's a real honour to work with many of the principals here today that are in my network to try and change and create positive learning environments for students across Victoria. So about my school, and many of you will have heard of Dandenong High School or know about Dandenong High School. It was established in 1919. It's one of the oldest in the state. It has approximately 2,000 students on one site, which I thought was really, really big, but then I've spoken to other people on the panel and realised that it's not one of the biggest. But we are on one site, we're 7 to 12 and we're co-ed. Dandenong is a very low socioeconomic area. Our SFO is 0.74. We're also highly multicultural, which I know many of your schools are. At current check, we have 84 languages other than English amongst our student cohort. 95% of our students learn English as a second language, and we now have over 25% of our students who come from a refugee or asylum seeker background. A growing number of those are asylum seekers. They come directly from the language schools, from boats and from detention, and we have a growing number of unaccompanied minors as well. So I serve a challenging, complex, but incredibly rewarding community. It's a community that really value education. Students and parents come to our school because they want their students to learn and they want their students to achieve success. And as I touched on earlier, Dandenong High School has been through incredible redevelopment since 2005. Very briefly, in a nutshell, because it's important to the context, in 2005, 3 schools in the local area, that is Dandenong High School, Cleveland Secondary College and Doveton, made a decision to merge together to become one school. Now, it wasn't directed or led by the department or by the government, it was a decision from the 3 schools. And the reason why they made that decision was they felt that as independent schools, as 3 separate schools, that we couldn't serve or meet the needs of our community. Our data was telling us that. And we felt that if we came together to be one school, we could better do that. But a conscious decision was made by the then Principal Martin Culkin. Conscious decision in 2005 was made at the beginning to create what we called a new educational entity. That what we wouldn't do was take bits from the old schools and put them together, things that we thought were important, and try and make a new whole. What we would do was ask ourselves 4 very important questions, and they were, who is our community? What are their unique needs? What does powerful learning look like? And what do we want our new school to be so that our students can learn and they can learn well? And so the idea was that we would create a very new school. And it's been an incredible journey for us, and we're not at the end of it yet. In 2008, we established our vision to guide our work. And these are just some of the things that have challenged the school and that we've been working through. We've created a unique school structure. That is 7 houses or small schools on the one site, so that our students create or feel a sense of belonging and connection to the school. We've established a collaborative learning model in years 7 to 9 with teams of 3 teachers working together with 50 students and grouping the students depending on the learning. We're 3/4 of the way through a $45 million building project of architecturally designed learning spaces, and we're not finished yet. We still need some funding for that. Just thought I'd put that in there. We've personalised our senior studies, thank you. We've personalised our senior studies and pathways program in years 7 to 10, and we're developing at the moment a whole school approach to a design for learning. That is a shared understanding across the school about a pedagogical approach, which means that in every classroom our students learn and they improve and reach their potential. And we've had to build a new community. Bringing together 3 very different schools, staff, students and parents. So when I was asked, and I have been thinking about this, I was asked what was my vision for education in Victoria and the focus of my work and the work of my school at the moment. I came up with one sentence at first, and that was, my vision for education in Victoria is that students in all schools reach their potential and achieve their success. All students are learning. Now, I said that, and we shared a phone conversation. Then I was a bit worried because it seemed deceptively simple. So I'll explain what I mean, because for us at my school, it's not simple at all. You see, there's a real challenge for me and my school community, and that is to define what success looks like, and to question the common perception that student achievement should be purely measured by NAPLAN results and by the ATAR score. That doesn't mean that these measures aren't important, because they are. And obviously it's my responsibility as the principal to lead my community to ensure that our students do meet high levels of academic excellence. But I want to tell you a story. I think success needs to be defined in many different ways, because there may be many principals in this room, like me, dread the release of VCE results in December at the end of the year, and think on the night before what impact they will have in terms of media and community perception outside the school, and staff, student and parent morale inside. And 2 years ago, I awaited my first VCE results as principal with trepidation. Would we have less students above 90? Would our percentage of students that have got a study score over 40 go down? And how would that reflect my first year as principal? What would people say? And what would they compare me to? When the data came, there was a need to explain, a need to rationalise, and dare I say, justify the results, because they were okay, but we hadn't moved forward. But what concerns me most, if I think about where my headspace was then, is how we responded as a school. Because what we did was we set seemingly impossible targets in our AIP about how we would have more students that would get over a certain ATAR, with no real sense of what they meant and how we were actually going to get there. We focused on changing structures, not teacher practice and student learning. So 2014 as a principal, I decided to take a little bit of control, and that we would take a different approach. To what we would do was we would work effectively as a school to build a culture of whole school improvement and shared responsibility, and we'd include the student. We reduced our our strategic plan and our AIP in effect to one sentence. And that is, as a school community, parents, staff and students, we could all understand, so it was a sentence that we could all understand, we could all work towards, it was achievable, and more importantly, we could measure it. And the sentence is this. So as a school at Dandenong High School, we aim to achieve in every classroom at least 1 year's learning growth in 1 year, no matter where a student starts and ends, so that all our students reach their potential and achieve their desired pathway beyond school. And that's what we're aiming and working towards. The irony is, of course, if we can do that and ensure that in every classroom our students are doing that, our data will improve anyway. For me, though, the message I wanted to give today is it's important collectively as educators to encourage the wider community to measure success not just based on achievement data, but on student learning growth. John Hattie and Patrick Griffin would support me. There is a concern at the moment when you look at Patrick Griffin's data across Victorian schools that the top 40% of learners may achieve good ATAR scores, but they're not achieving their maximum learning growth and therefore not achieving their potential. So to finish, what does success look like at Dandenong High School in 2014 and 15? And it's a mixed bag, and that's important. And you know what? I can sit here and say to all of you that I'm really proud of that. We have academic success and excellence. We have outstanding ATAR results. In fact, at the start of the year when we honoured that high academic achievement, there were incredibly proud parents of students that got 97.85 and had scholarships to Monash and Melbourne universities, and that is fantastic. And there was great parental and school pride in that. But there was no less pride in a family who sat and watched their son, who was the first in 5 generations to finish Year 12 and now has an apprenticeship at Medrick & Holmes. And no less pride for a refugee student who is unaccompanied minor, his family are in a refugee camp overseas, who's only been learning English for 2 years and is going on a scholarship to RMIT. Or an Indigenous student who is moving to Geelong today to start a community-funded scholarship in midwifery, and is incredibly proud and came into the school yesterday. And 99% of our students achieve their chosen pathway. So as I finish, I come back to my own story and my quest to make a difference. And what I want to do is just draw on the words of one of our students 3 years ago, and his name was Andrew Lee, and he was our school captain. And at his final address to the student body, he said this. He said, Dandenong High School has long been known as a community of disadvantage. But when you walk through the gates of Dandenong Dandenong Community. When you walk through the gates of Dandenong High School, there is no disadvantage there, only an air of opportunity. So if I have to sum up my vision for education in Victoria, I could simply say this, that every student enrolled in any school in Victoria experiences that opportunity, has Andrew's experience, and learns and reaches their potential. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. I guess I sit here and look out and I know that I'm not talking as someone who's an expert. I look out and I see that I'm talking to colleagues. And I think that what's really important for me is that as I look around the room, there are people in this room who have taken schools on and have made a difference, which has inspired me to become a leader, and I can see the difference that they've made. I've recently moved schools. I was at Lakeview Senior College in Caroline Springs, which was a pretty comfortable school, very easy school to work in. We had a situation of having to stop people coming in the door because we had too many students. And I've gone to a school, Ballarat Secondary College, which is a school that has a really low public perception and has declining enrolments. And so it's a completely different challenge. And I've been asked lots of times about why I made that decision to change schools. And I think that the thing that was one of the biggest influences on me making that decision was that not only did I live in that community and I wanted to make a difference in that community, but it was really the inspiration that I'd drawn from colleagues that I'd seen from my previous work about the difference that people can make when they go into a school with a clear vision and purpose, and that real belief that all students can learn. And I had I think the great fortune of working in the Western Metropolitan region at a time when Catherine Henderson led that region, and I just think that the really strong message that she sent out to every principal in that region about that challenge of every child can learn, and she just challenged every teacher, every principal who ever said, well, what can we do? Look where our kids are coming from. We can't really make any difference. And she just challenged that and challenged it and challenged it. And I just thought that the difference that was made when that really strong belief started to be held not only by principals but all members of the school community, the difference in the data in terms of NAPLAN and achievement was amazing, and it certainly has inspired me to make the change that I have. I guess I took on my challenge and looked at it as, do you take on the premiers that really can't improve any further, or do you take on the wooden spooners when you think that there is that opportunity for improvement? My background has been that I've worked in schools for around 30 years. I've also had the opportunity to work at the Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority as a curriculum manager, which was a fantastic experience. And I've also worked in human services for a couple of years as well. So I've had a broad range of experience in and out of schools, which I think have really helped me to take on the challenge that I'm taking on now. I look back at every job that I've had or every position I've had, and I think that I could do it better from in reflection, because I think everything that I've done I've learned from and reflected on, and I think that's where I'm at the moment. So as I look around the room, I think I'm looking at a whole lot of people that will help me and have helped me to get to where I want to go with my current school. In terms of my vision for government education, I just think that government education has got to offer opportunity and a pathway for all students, whether they be from the lowest socioeconomic area or the highest. We've got to be a sector and a system that talks to every student and every parent about the opportunities that it provides. And I think from my recent experience of changing schools in the last 6 months, one of the things I think about is the guaranteed and viable curriculum. That notion that every child should have available to them the same curriculum. It doesn't matter which class they're in at the same year level, and be taught the same curriculum at the same time, and that fit into a year. And I look at the two schools that the one that I've come from and the one that I've gone to, in terms of the equity, in terms of the infrastructure, the capacity, the opportunities that currently exist between those two schools, and the massive chasm that exists between those schools is quite amazing. And when you look at things like even school fees and the amount of school fees that are collected between one school and others, and the reliance on that and the difference that makes to resources, it's I think quite stark and amazing. And I think one of our challenges and one of the visions that I have for government education is that we provide that equity in terms of the opportunities that all of our kids have, doesn't matter where they're from, when they go to a school, that they have all of those same opportunities and resources and infrastructure available to them. I think that's one of our big challenges. Clearly, as a principal, the area that we make the most difference though is with our human resources and the people that we work with. And our great challenge, I think, as a principal, and from my experience going to the school that I've gone to, was that clearly there'd been a lost confidence in the ability to provide learning for students. And I think as leaders, one of the things that we have to do is to be really strong about the fact that we believe unequivocally that we can make a difference and that every child can learn, and that we can lead that. And as a leader, everything that we say and we do is watched really carefully, it's picked apart, and we have to be at all times really positive and on message consistently, both with our staff and out in our community, about that strong belief that every child can learn, and that we as a school community and our school community is the best one to make a difference for our kids. And that I think is one of the biggest things that I've noticed and learned really quickly from the two schools that I've been at in the last 6 months. When I was appointed to Ballarat Secondary College, the first thing that I did was went to one of the campuses and ordered that the prominent and really large computer swap meet sign be taken off the front fence, because it was the most modern and prominent sign, and for the last 10 or 15 years that I've driven past the school, all I saw was that there was a computer swap meet on every month. And that really, I think, summed up what the community thought of the school, because the sign from the school was an old treated pine sign that had the school sort of the name there, if you read it really closely, but it was the computer swap meet sign that held the greatest prominence. And it's interesting that people in the community thought that the school was closed and that its only use now was to have swap meets. So I think that symbolically, what our schools look like, that really strong message that we constantly send is absolutely critical in building that confidence in our system and making people believe that we're able to deliver. And so it was just making those little differences. It was because I live in that community, it was amazing the amount of people that commented to me about the fact that that sign had disappeared and that it made a difference. So it was a strong message, I guess, in learning and in symbolic leadership. The other thing that happened was that we had a senior campus with no uniform. We had students who at lunchtime could just wander down the street into the mall. And I know that Harold, who's was campus principal, is sitting in the audience at the moment. And he said to me that he was called to the police station on about 7 occasions, because every time there was an issue in the local community or in the mall, it was just assumed that the students come from our school because they weren't in uniform, they were young people. And on the 7 occasions he was called to the police station, not once were they students from the school. So I think again that perception that the school community and the community at large has of our schools plays a really big part in what their expectations are of the college, who actually attends it, and how we can go about or what we need to do to make sure that we can create a learning environment that all students can obviously participate in and learn in. Like Susan, one of our biggest challenges obviously is how we measure achievement. We had a VCE score of 22 at the end of the last year. At my previous school, and because I was appointed at the end of last term, I was sort of interested in two schools' VCE results. And at my previous school, I think it was up to 28.5 or something. So we're pushing up towards the state average, which was what we're aiming for. So the difference, again, is quite stark in terms of what your expectations are and how you measure success. But on Friday there was an article in our local paper, and being in a regional centre, the local media still has a really strong influence. There was an article published about how effective the local independent Ballarat Clarendon College was. It had 67% of students in the top quartile of NAPLAN results, and it contrasted it with Ballarat Secondary College that had 2% in the top quartile, and that's put in the paper. The interesting thing about that was that even though they were talking about NAPLAN and they put the table in with a NAPLAN heading on it, it was actually socio-economic data, so it had actually nothing to do with NAPLAN data at all. But it still put that strong message out there, and I had lots of staff who were jumping up and down and saying, they've got to put a retraction in the paper, and we're going to write letters to the editor. And I said, well, please don't do any of that. We really can't do that, because if they put a retraction in, what are they going to say? They're going to say that all our parents are actually poor, and they're in the bottom 67% of our parents are from the bottom quartile. So I said the best thing we can do really is we've got to move on. We've got to make a difference within our school, but those things we can't control. We've got to let those go and move on and let that slip by and not continue to put it in the public's face, I guess, about where the school's at the moment. So as a leader, I think that the thing where I'm at on my journey at the moment is that it's really important that I can project that strong belief in the school, in students and students' ability to learn, and I have to project that in the public domain as well, because it's a very competitive town, I guess, in terms of having lots of independent schools. It's a blazer and tie type town, and schools are judged on that. And the VCE results that are published every day, at the end of the year, the dux of every school is put there with their score, etc. So that's the sort of challenging environment that we're in. But I think that what's important is to, as I said, have clear sense of purpose and vision for the school, and put in place a plan that all of the staff and all of the community can have ownership and buy into. And as Jules said before with policy, I think it's the same within the school, that you've just got to map your way forward and put a strategy in place that people can actually believe in, have ownership of, participate in, as a way to take your school forward. We're like Susan, we're looking at not measuring and not hanging our hat on NAPLAN and VCE results. We're looking at that year improvement as well, that annual improvement, as a way of trying to demonstrate that we make a difference for all of our students. So I guess that from my perspective, I want to thank those people in the room who've been an inspiration to me in the work that they've done. And I think that, like has been mentioned, I think around a room like this there are so many people who have stories that are really inspirational about the difference that they make to their schools. And I think sometimes we never hear about them because they're so focused on making a difference within their school that it's unless you sit down and talk to someone that you actually hear that rich story about what they've actually done to make a difference. And I just wanted to finish by saying that we have an incredible responsibility to every child that walks through the door. We have to meet their needs in so many different ways. But I guess from the school that I'm at the moment, one of the things that's been most telling is that I think it's important that we must remember that we are we're a part of education and we're part of learning, and that our core business is about learning at all times, and having those high expectations about students actually learning is really important. And one of my challenges with my staff is that there's a view that it's about looking after people. It's not about that our job isn't to actually teach them or for the students to actually learn, that we do our job if we just look after them. And I think that that's one of the really big challenges that I face, and I think that we all have in terms of our work. And I guess that I'm just going to finish with that. I just love the quote from Nelson Mandela about the fact that and you remember his context and where he come from, that for him education is the greatest weapon that we have to create change in the world. And I guess that we have that responsibility to educate all of our children to create that change and to create a world where they can prosper and where our world can be a better one than it is currently. And it's a big I think it's a big burden that we wear sometimes, but we take it on. I think we love it. We're always optimistic, and I think that we're all successful in what we do, and we should stop at times and just reflect on all of the good things that we do in our work, because in our day we always hear about all of the things that we're not doing well, and it's really important that we're able to take that time out to think about the positive things that we do and the differences that we make to our young people. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Morning everyone, and it's lovely to see people that I've worked with over the course of my career, and also many faces in the audience who have supported me in my journey, particularly the last 6 years of my principalship, whether it's in the Burundara network or a wider group of principals who have been on the end of the phone. I've been in 4 schools, and I came to Balwyn High School at the start of 2006, having spent 13 years at Heathmont. And through that time, the merger of Heathmont Secondary and Eastern Secondary College, and that was a fantastic learning experience. It was very, very difficult to merge 2 school communities, but working with the likes of John Handley prepared me for a lot of challenges at Balwyn. In many ways. But I suppose what I took to Balwyn was that basically you have the belief that you want every child to succeed. And certainly at Heathmont, I learnt that very much about raising aspirations of parents as much as students. But I also found that students, when they're provided with appropriate support and pathways, can shine. So I have great memories of students that went on to become trainees of the year through the VCAL and VET programs. When I saw the advertisement for the assistant principal at Balwyn, there were actually 2 positions, and had there only been one, I wouldn't have applied, because I knew that there was a very good fellow in an acting position, but I was ready to move on and set myself a new challenge. There were 2 things said to me on the last day. I was given a blow-up foot cushion because people were convinced that I would be able to sit back and put my feet up at Balwyn and not have to work. Never worked harder in my life. And the second one was a bit of a warning about the staff culture at Balwyn. So I had a fairly nervous Christmas period. Obviously, Balwyn is a high-performing school. It's well known in the government system. It should be a leader in the system, and that's certainly how I've gone about my principalship. My introduction to one staff member when Bruce Armstrong was taking me around, he said to me, "Why would you change school so late in your career?" Needless to say, I'm still at Baldwin, he isn't. So there certainly was some challenging staff culture, and I think Bruce Armstrong goes on the record in terms of his courageous leadership around some of those things. But certainly that goes to the heart of the challenge that I faced, not only as a member of the principal team under his principalship, but certainly in the last 6 years. When you are a high-performing school, there is enormous community expectation to continue to grow and achieve. So, yes, I still get nervous the night before the ATARs because there is an enormous community expectation that Baldwin's going to be in the top 10 government schools. We are a zone, every residential sign, house for sale, the Baldwin zone. There are a number of schools represented here today. They're exactly the same. The media is fascinated by schools that have residential zones and therefore property prices that are dependent on the success of the school. So there's a tremendous responsibility. But I suppose what I want to concentrate on today, and I share everything that Susan and Rick have talked about in terms of, regardless of context, supporting every child to be their very best. There are challenges certainly inside our school community and outside our school community. And one of the things that we've really tried to do across the board is encourage students at Baldwin to see that it is more than the marks and it is more than the ATAR, and that is it about a well-rounded education so that they go on to be really responsible and successful at tertiary level. And I was really dismayed when Christopher Bantic wrote in The Age last year. It was about, don't worry about the World Challenge and the food stalls for the homeless and doing all of these extracurricular activities. It's about getting the highest ATAR so you get into the prestigious university. That did more to undermine any message that principals are saying to their school communities than anything else that I've heard in the last 12 months. Because we really do encourage students to have a well-rounded education. I've come from a gala soiree last night where I know that there were some sensational students with their performances, but they won't be on our honour board and they certainly won't get an ATAR that even their parents would hope for. They'll get the best one that they can, but it's not about that. So there is enormous pressure on schools that have got a high socio-economic cohort. And it's not just about achievement data, because obviously you've got a cohort of students that enter a gate every day. But I suppose what I'd like to really say is that my vision for state education is about a professional workforce. It starts with support for the principalship, and so people are inspired to apply to go into the principalship. We've all run AP panels and leading teacher panels. The number of applicants is dwindling in terms of those who are aspiring to move into those levels of responsibility. Maybe it's the way we role model the work-life balance, I don't know. But certainly my vision is that students, regardless of what school they're in, have the highest quality principals, system principals and leading teachers, and I've spent the last 6 years building leadership capacity in my staff. I run a leadership development program. I have 46 aspirant leaders, from first year graduates right through to range 2 teachers, and part of that is understanding the role of leadership in a school's success, because at the end of the first year, a teacher said to me, well, why would you be proud of why would you think you'd had an impact on the ATARs? It's all about the teachers. So I actually asked that as a quote in leading teachers selection panels now. What role is leadership? Is it only just about the teachers getting the ATARs? So I know we're running short of time, but certainly I'm proud to be principal of Baldwin High School. We have our own challenges around the context, obviously around the cultural diversity of the school, in many ways about highly aspirational Asian parents. We have significant Asian parents, but 54 nationalities, incredible stress on kids to be perfect, and therefore a level of staff support that I have to put around mental health support for students and our student support services team. But I want Balwyn to be known as really promoting whole of child education rather than the ATARs that we do enjoy. But certainly one of the key things that I am proud that I have changed is that Balwyn has gone from the castle with the moat to being an open school where we welcome working with and learning with other schools in our great government school system. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Okay, over to me. So now I've relinquished my role as principal after 20 years on the job and my children have finished in school. There are two things that have happened that have intensified my passion about public schools. The first one is taking on this role, and that involves trying to get my head around the complex funding formula. And if you read today's paper, you'll see that it is complex because even we have situations where the Minister and someone like Ken Boston have a different perception of things. The Auditor General and the chief financial people in the department seem to have different perceptions of how schools are funded. So it is quite challenging to get my head around the situation sufficiently that I can argue our case. The other thing that has happened on a more personal level in recent years is that I've assumed a new position. I've become a grandmother, and there's nothing like the zealotry of a grandmother. It knows no bounds. So I want for my grandchild that he has the sort of education that I had. I grew up in a large family in a country town in Victoria. The economic circumstances of my family in the era in which I grew up were no handicap to me or my siblings achieving everything that we wanted, and we did. This week, Richard Teese has published a book, The Common Weal. For those maths teachers, weal means common good, means the common good. It's W-E-A-L. So it's about public high schools between 1920 and 2010. And he writes that public high schools were, and I quote, created to widen social access to knowledge, to break down social barriers, to ignore rather than reflect social attributes of learners, to disseminate knowledge across the social strata. But what we actually now have is a system where it is predominantly a child's social background that predetermines their success in schools. So it would appear that knowledge is no longer being disseminated across the social strata. So something went wrong in recent years, in recent decades. Teese says in his book, the choice has failed our education system. And he argues that our public schools have to be funded to redress the problems that this choice agenda has created. So I think we live in quite a crazy world where mothers feel they have to rush back to work so that they can advantage their children by saving their pennies to put them into private schools, where children have to go to camps in primary school, international camps, but their fathers don't have time to perhaps take them surfing when they get home because they're too stressed earning the money to put them in private schools. I live in inner city Melbourne, close to my old school. The kids in our street, who happen to be mostly boys, pretty much all go to Scotch. Last Saturday I was up the ladder scraping the paint off the peeling weatherboards when our neighbour, in a much more salubrious house, in an unusual gesture of friendliness, called over the fence, and he's from a very well-known Melbourne family. I just rode past your school where you were the headmaster. It's looking good, he said. So he lives in such a socially conservative world that he thinks that all principals are headmasters. And it's a surprise if a public school looks good. So I didn't know where to start to tell him that I was no longer a headmaster. So my strong belief is that the problems that we have, if we create a more stratified society, are quite diabolical. that if you put children in schools with such different trappings of wealth as we now have, we will breed a discontent and a resentment that will simply fester. We see it already in parts of Australia and certainly in gated communities in countries overseas where there is such disparity between rich and poor. So I want the education that will be provided for my grandchild to be one that is for the common good. Public high schools have achieved much over the decades and I believe it can be built on. So thank you.
Look, I think that panel lived up to expectations, Jill, in that you've got a range, a diversity, and some very strong points that we sort of know, but we have to get together like this to remind ourselves about them again.